My name is Piers Smith and I'm a solution architect at Unique. Welcome to this tutorial in which I'll give you an example of how you can connect a unique digital human to an Amazon Lex bot using Unique's open source reference application for creating conversation interfaces. This tutorial is part of a series we've created to help customers understand the technical components of building a digital human experience. Before we start, if you haven't already watched the tutorial video that introduced this application, please do go back and watch it, as well as introducing you to the purpose of this application and how it fits into the architecture of a unique digital human. The tutorial shows you where to get the code and how to get it ready for use. Now, Lex is one of the platforms for which Unique has a built-in connector that you can configure in Unique Creator. So why bother creating my own application? If you'll recall in the tutorial video, I said that one of the reasons you might choose to use your own application is so that you're not locked into integration choices that have been made for you, particularly in terms of how features you may have used in your bot are brought through to your digital human. If you're using the built-in connector, you need to configure your Lex bot in a particular way to get the best out of your digital human. But if you use your own application and your bot uses features like response cards, which aren't supported by the connector, then using your own application gives you back that control. Again, it's all about flexibility, and Unique's architecture gives you those choices. So with that out of the way, this tutorial assumes that you've cloned the application code and installed the packages, which means you're ready to connect a conversation platform. While the application includes a number of pre-written modules, in this tutorial, I'm going to focus just on using the one for Amazon Lex. I will be doing tutorials for some of the other platforms for which I've already written modules. The steps for all of them will be largely the same. Each one has a set of associated environment variables, which are all explained in this README. And all you need to do is add the values that correspond to your environment and you'll be ready to connect. Okay, so here I am in my IDE where I have the code I cloned in the earlier video and all the package dependencies have been installed. So all I need to do now to create the interface for my Amazon Lex bot is set up a few environment variables. The repo has a default environment file which contains all possible environment variables, and I've created a new one with just the values that I need for Lex. And you can see there's only a few values I need and I'm going to be done. The values needed here come from your AWS account and from your Lex bot. The first two values I need are the credentials the application will use to connect to my account. For this demo, I'm using a personal account, which means my account has root access. So an access key for this account is going to give me access to my Lex bot. This isn't the method you should use for a production deployment, however. Best practice is to create a new IAM user with limited permissions, which in this case would be Lex, and then generate keys for that user. This level of AWS IAM configuration is out of scope for this tutorial, but there's a lot of excellent information from AWS that explains how to do this. So I have a key I created earlier, and I'm going to paste the values for it into my end file. I am going to be deprecating this key after this demo, so I'm not going to bother blurring it. So the first value I need is the ID for the access key, and then the second value is the corresponding secret key that goes with it. The next values I need all come from my Lex bot. Now, the first thing I need is the AWS region into which my bot has been deployed. So if I come over to Lex, I can see the region in the top right of the screen here, and I can see the region for my bot is US East 1. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into the environment file. The next thing I need is the bot alias. Now, bot aliases in Amazon Lex are pointers to specific versions of your bot. So depending on how you manage your workflow, you may want to target a specific version with your application, in which case you would use an alias. When you first create your bot, there is only one version, which is $latest. This is your working copy. When you publish your bot, Lex creates a version to which you can assign an alias, and I've called mine production. You can use the latest version while you're developing, but you should publish a version and switch to that alias before you go live. That's because Lex does limit the number of runtime requests that you can make to the latest version of the bot. So I'm going to pick up the bot alias and drop that in. Bot name is simple enough. Mine is called demo. I'm going to drop that in as well. And the last thing I need is the welcome intent. The reason we need this is that Lex starts conversations a little differently to platforms like Dialogflow or Watson. In those platforms, an event fires at the start of a conversation, which you can use to trigger dialogue so that it's your bot who speaks first in a conversation using a greeting, for example. If you want the same behavior from your Lex bot so that your digital human speaks first and greets your users, you need to define an intent that will contain your greeting and then insert the name of the intent in the environment file. The application will then fire this intent when Unique sends a welcome request, which happens at the beginning of a conversation. So you can see here I've created an intent called welcome, and it needs no utterance variations as I'm not going to use NLP to trigger it. And down here I've defined what I want to send back in the form of some dialogue and a data payload, which I'll explain when we test it. So I'm going to pick up the name of my intent and drop it into the environment file as well. And that's it. So all I've had to do is follow the introduction tutorial, clone the repo and install the packages, and then add some values to this environment file. I'm now ready to start this application and verify that it's binding a route for my Lex service and that it's ready for requests. So I can see here it's bound and it's listening on port 5000. So I'm ready to test. And for that, I'm going to use Postman. From the first video, you'll recall this application is implementing a request and response contract following Unique specification, and that when a conversation starts or an end user says something to a digital human, the Unique platform sends a request to the conversation interface. That means I can test my application by sending a request myself in the correct specification. So I can see how my application is going to respond when it's connected to my digital human and Unique starts sending requests. So I'm going to create a new request, drop in the path for my locally running application, and then drop in a request body that complies with the specification and send it. And there we go. So I have a response from my Lexbot, which is returning this nice bit of welcome dialogue that I've written. And this is in a response payload that complies with Unique specification. You can also see here that I've used another built-in capability of this module, which is the ability to add data payloads to my dialogue nodes, which will be passed through to my front end. That means that if during a conversation I want my digital human to show something on the screen, like an image in this case, or a video, or offer some suggestions on the screen, I can add that data right in my conversation model so that it comes up exactly when I want it to. So this application is now ready for me to connect to a digital human. For that, I'm going to need to deploy it so that the interface can be reached from Unique. So that's the next step. I'll be posting more tutorials in this series that will show you some options for how to do this. And that's it. Thank you for watching. If you have further questions, please contact us by visiting digitalhumans.com.